everybody, welcome back to WhatCulture Wrestling. I am, of course, Gareth, stood in a secret location which is definitely not my bedroom. But as you've probably noticed, yes, by now, I'm not sat at my desk looking like a complete melon. We're back to the old way of doing things, and you know what, I love it. But that's not the reason you chose to click on this video today. You wanted to see what went down on last night's NXT, which was obviously the Fallout show from New Year's Evil, and we saw a lot of first round matches from the Dusty Road Tag Team Classic Championship Cup Tournament. Yeah. So without further ado, I am Gareth, of course, from WhatCulture Wrestling. Like I said before, these are the ups and downs for NXT. Let's get rockin'. So to kick off this show, we had a grudge match straight away between Shotzi Blackheart and Candice LeRae. If you've seen any NXT over the last couple of months, really, you'll know that these two exactly do not like each other. And right from the off, they went straight for each other. The commentary team were just putting over the fact that Shotzi Blackheart really didn't like Candice LeRae because she destroyed a tank, because she knocked her out of that battle royale for the NXT Championship #1 contendership thing. And there was a little callback to this at one point, because Candice LeRae was like, she was flat on her back on some steel steps, and Shotzi Blackheart went to like jump on her, and she put her feet up to do that monkey flip that eliminated her from that match, and she didn't do it. She scouted it, so Shotzi Blackheart is learning. Good. Well, I say she's learning, but in reality, I don't think she actually is, to be honest. Midway through the bout, Indy Hartwell, obviously at ringside supporting Candice LeRae, got involved, did a bit of interference, and you thought, alright, cool, she knows that's going on there now. She won't get distracted by that later in the match, surely. But of course, as she was climbing to the top rope and she was about to perform that really cool senton thing that she does onto Candice LeRae, Indy Hartwell, she interfered again. She stood up on the rope. She was like, oh, look at me. And then this opened the door for Candice LeRae to hit her with like a swinging net breaker off the top rope for the victory. So yet again, there were shenanigans involving a match with Shotzi Blackheart, and Shotzi Blackheart came out the worse for it. So I've got to be honest, you can't really take much away from the women involved in the match, because the match itself was what you'd expect from these two. They've been two of the most consistent performers NXT have had over the last couple of months. But in terms of the actual feud itself, it's gone a weird way, because things got quite intense early on when they had that singles match after the aforementioned Battle Royal where all that stuff happened. Then Candice LeRae destroyed a tank, and then they had a match at War Games where they were both captains, and that should have probably been it. That was the big thing. That was the big, epic, destructive match that they should have had against each other, but it's just kind of trickled on after that. We've had Johnny Gargano awarding Candice LeRae with the weird Shotzi doll trophy, and Shotzi Blackheart winning with Kushida last week against LeRae and Gargano. But this match felt like a backward step. It felt like something that probably should have happened a lot earlier, like earlier on in the feud. So for that reason, I'm giving it a down. Next up, Pete Dunne arrived onto the scene with the king of NXT boys, and it looked like he was looking for trouble, because Finn Balor came down to the ring and he was putting over Kyle O'Reilly because they had that epic New Year's Evil match together, and he was like, oh, Kyle, you're really good, but I'm better. Now your jaw hurts, and mine doesn't because I've had surgery. But obviously he was setting the stage for his next challenger, and guess who it was? Guess who popped up and said, I want to go with that belt? It was Pete Dunne, because obviously he arrived just before this, so it kind of synced up. And then Pete Dunne straight away was like, oh, you're the title holder at this point. Also, you're pretty much the poster boy of European wrestling, but the only reason you're either of those things is because I'm not. Which is, yeah, that usually is how it works. This all kind of devolved into a big brawl, and Balor was getting outnumbered. Obviously, there was a big old 3-on-1 numbers game thing going against him. And then Kyle O'Reilly came down to make a save, and the rest of the Undisputed Era boys that are all fit at this point. And it was looking like, okay, where's this gonna go? We had Kyle O'Reilly and Finn Balor just stare at each other like, oh, is there gonna be a continuation there? And then Pete Dunne was just kind of stood on the entranceway with Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch, and they were just staring on like, oh, you've got us this time. But things were to get a lot more interesting as the night went on. But in terms of a segment as a whole, I really enjoyed it. There was a lot of fighting and there was a lot of name calling, so I'm giving it an up. Next up, we had an interview with Johnny Gargano backstage, and he was bigging up The Way's chances of winning the men's and women's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classics. And then Austin Theory turned up and gave him a gift. So the gift in question was like an envelope. He opened the envelope. There was a drawing of Johnny Gargano, which was drawn by Dexter Loomis, who would be facing Johnny Gargano later on in the night in a non-title match. And then on the back of the picture, there was also an Austin Theory drawing, which had like an idiot word there with an arrow pointing at Austin Theory. It really upset him, and I strangely felt sorry for Austin Theory. What is wrong with me? But right on after this, we had the first round of the Dusty Road Tag Team Classic, the men's version that is, and it was the grizzled young veterans taking on Ever Rise in the first match of this tournament. And it just felt so prestigious. You had like this graphic going all the way around the ring that showed the old winners from the past, had all the Dusty Roads like colours and everything else. It was really good. And you had the trophy obviously on the entranceway, which is usually what happens, the traditional thing. And then you had like William Regal before the match say, right lads, this is the first match of the Dusty Classic, go and kill each other. And you know what, that's exactly what they did. But this wasn't to be the kind of match you maybe expected it was on the tin. If you were to read this tin of grizzled young veterans and Ever Rise, if you had that tin there, you go, okay, grizzled young veterans are probably going to pulverize Ever Rise and that'll be it. No, because there was a point in this match where Ever Rise just seemed to understand exactly what they are as a team and use that to their benefit. Because they tried to get in the heads of grizzled young veterans just by being idiots, really, just being like really confident and cocky, saying, oh, we're gonna kick your ass, and every time they did get a little bit of offense in, they just started kind of smack talking young grizzled veterans, and it really got in the head of James Drake. But what I loved about this is Zach Gibson took him outside. He was like, oh, get your stuff together, come on, we need to change our tactics, and they did that, and they ended up whooping some ass. The match finally ended when Matt Martel was nailed by the Ticket to Mayhem by grizzled young veterans, and as you probably guessed from that statement there, they are now into the next round, round 2 for the grizzled young veterans, and to be honest, they're my picks. They got to the finals last year. They're the former NXT UK champions, tag team champions. You know what? Put my money on them. After this, we had a little recap of the Raquel Gonzalez Rhea Ripley war that went down at New Year's Evil, and based on this promo and the way that Raquel Gonzalez was just speaking in it, it looks like she's got her eyes firmly set on Io Shirai and her NXT Women's Championship. Following this, Shotzi Blackheart had an interview backstage after losing her match by being distracted earlier in the night, and she was like, you know what? I'm not going to let that get me down. I'm going to enter the Women's Dusty Cup Challenge Tag Team Classic, and I'm going to partner with Ember Moon, and we're going to kick all the ass. And you know what? I believe her. Away from the Dusty Classic and all that good tag team action, though, we then had Johnny Gargano taking on Dexter Loomis, as was announced earlier in the night. And you know what? Nah, it wasn't for me, damn. But quickly, before I kind of go into the match itself, there was a little moment at the very beginning when this match kind of got brought into NXT, when Johnny Gargano was just stood in the ring and he was like doing his thing with his little belt, and he had his mouth open, and it looked like he was miming to his own theme song, like he was going, ha ha, and it really made me chuckle. So that is we're gonna bring it up here. There is my Gargano meter. That is gonna get a 72% on the Gargano meter, because it made me laugh. But again, do not get me wrong, this match, there was some moments within this match that genuinely made my jaw drop. Like, there was a point when Johnny Gargano just went to like kick Dexter Loomis in the face on the outside. He dodged him, kicked up, and just bang, got him again. It was just, I love Dexter Loomis when he does stuff like this, when he does randomly just look like the Terminator. And I think going forward, to get the best out of him as a character, you need to present him as that kind of Terminator figure, which is something Wade Barrett even suggested, even kind of talked about on commentary. But that's not what happened here, because in the closing stages of this match, he got distracted into a loss. And if that sounds familiar, it's because, yes, it's pretty much the same thing that happened earlier in the night with the other members of The Way. Yes, just when Loomis had blocked the one final beat twice for the second time in the match, he then got distracted by Austin Theory. He was on the side of the apron. He was like, oh, look at me, look at me. So he put him in the silence, that silence kind of sleeper that he has. And then Johnny Gargano pulled him over into a roll-up, which then sent Austin Theory flying over the top rope, and then got the victory via roll-up, distraction, finish. Simon Miller would love this episode. But of course, this was all just leading to the setup that was next week. We're going to have Johnny Gargano and Austin Theory of The Way taking on Leon Ruff and Kushida. Kushida came after this match, and he stopped those two beating up Dexter Loomis on the outside, because Dexter Loomis was a monster at one point, but now he can't even beat up these two idiots. And then he picked up the North American Championship, and he was like looking at that. So I was like, all right, do you want that belt, or do you want to beat him next week in the tag match? It felt very blurry, and it just felt like this match was put there as a way of building to the tag team match coming next week. Dexter Loomis looks like an idiot. Again, we can solve this problem, just put him in a leather jacket, some nice shades, give him a shotgun, let him go crazy. Oh, maybe don't give him the shotgun. After this, we had Lorcan, Birch, and Pete Dunne all backstage, and they were like, right, Undisputed Era, they've ran NXT for ages, we're going to run it now, and we're probably going to beat up Kyle O'Reilly at some point tonight, which maybe they do, maybe they don't. Right, and straight away, I'm going to give this next segment a note, because I loved it. it was just a bit different. It was a backstage segment which was hosted by Wade Barrett. He was having an interview between Timothy Thatcher and Tommaso Ciampa. Obviously, if you saw New Year's Eve last week, you'll know that the previously advertised Fight Pit match did not go down because Timothy Thatcher got an injury in the lead up to it. He was training so dang hard, he couldn't get to the match. The medical staff, the people in the back said, nope, we're not going to clear you. And this was really interesting. And I say this because it seemed like Ciampa and Barrett were trying to get to the bottom of what the injury actually was, and Thatcher was having none of it. He was like, all you need to know is I'm fit now and there's no problem. Because either he didn't want to give away that he had a weakness that could be obviously isolated in the match itself, or the fact that there maybe wasn't an injury and he just wanted more time to prepare. I've got a beard. And what I loved about this backstage segment as well is that we finally got a genuine, concrete, hard reason why these two didn't like each other in the first place. Thatcher said he had no problem with Ciampa going into this little feud that they had. He was like, no, I was just trying to go to the ring and educate the next generation. And Ciampa said, nope, no you weren't. You were taking all kinds of liberties. That's why I don't like you. And I'm going to take all kinds of liberties in the fight pit. So just like that, in one little backstage segment, we've got a reason why these two don't like each other. And now the match itself, the Fight Pit 2 with no ropes, steel cage, only knockouts and submissions for the win, feels like a big deal, and I'm excited. Then we had Undisputed Era backstage being asked whether they were worried about the inevitable interference of Pete Dunne, Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch and all the rest of it. And they said, well, we've been dealing with that for ages. We always do deal with it. We always get through it. So we're not that worried. We're going to win this thing. And after this, we had our second Dusty Classic match of the night. And this one, it got me very intrigued. Because straight away, we had Isaiah Swerve Scott and Jake Atlas. They were a team, even though they've been enemies in recent weeks. They were just thrown together. You had to try and cooperate because WWE just love odd couples. But also, in the lead up to this night itself, we had the brackets for the Dusty Classic. They were announced on social media, and everyone saw that there was one team with like vacant kind of random faces, their avatars, and they had MSK underneath their names. So nobody knew what MSK was, didn't know who the team was, but we found out it was none other than those cheeky rascals that signed for WWE in December of 2020, if you remember rightly. They obviously shot to fame on Impact Wrestling. They've been incredible if you've watched them on there. And the question is, did they deliver upon their NXT debut? Yes, they did. It gets an up, and it doesn't just get an up. Gets my little yellow highlighter up. That's meant. It didn't work very well, that. Because the team of Wesley and Nash Carter absolutely tore it up here. There was a point where I think it was Nash, he like springboarded off the ropes and did like a corkscrew crossbody, and then we had like a Terminator dive, like a Kenny Omega Terminator dive from Wesley, and then they did this one thing where it was like a standing moonsault where one of them jumped up to do it and the other one pushed him. So he landed, like, it was insane. But even with all that, Scott and Atlas were not there just to be ran over. These two, they've been working their asses off on NXT and they proved exactly why they are tough cookies. But with all that said, they could not overcome this fresh, young, vibrant new team in the Dusty Classic. And in the end, it was Scott who got beaten by, he got propped up, and then I think it was Lee did like a jumping, flipping net breaker. It was an impressive finisher, and I nearly called them the Rascals, not the Rascals, MSK got the win. There was also a really funny moment in this match where I think Vic Joseph was just like, oh, these crazy rascals are really good at flipping. And I was like, if you know, you know. And after this, we had a little announcement to do with the Women's Dusty Cup Classic. We had 4 teams that were officially announced in the tournament. We had a match that's coming next week, which is going to be Mercedes Martinez and Toni Storm, Water Team, taking on Casey Catanzaro and Kaden Carter. You also have Indy Hartwell and Candice LeRae, they're one team, and obviously Shotzi Blackheart and Ember Moon from earlier in the night. Judging from that, it's looking pretty good at this point. We're still not entirely sure if there's going to be like a championship shot waiting at the end of this, or if there's going to be any other teams added to the mix, but right now, very excited. And then we had this really surreal moment where Scarlet was backstage, well, in some backstage area somewhere. There was loads of red mist and smoke in the background, and she had all these cards. She was like doing a card reading. Every time she put down a card, there was like a little bit of footage played. So we had like a card for Damian Priest, we had like a devil card for Karrion Kross, then we had like a Prince card, I think it was, for, obviously, you guessed it, the Prince, Finn Balor. So it looks like even though Balor's right now, he's kind of engaged with Pete Dunne, Kyle O'Reilly and all the rest of it, it looks like Karrion Kross is like the Thanos of NXT right now. He's just there, lurking in the background, just waiting to click his fingers and hopefully not destroy half of NXT. And then after this, we got another Xia Li squash match. up. Because obviously, like I said last week, all these weeks leading up to this, I was just dying to see Xia Li kick some ass, return, show off all these kind of martial arts expertise that she's been gaining and obviously showcasing in those segments, and she did it yet again here. This time she had a stick before she came into the ring. She was like showing off loads of kicks and flips, and I was like, oh, she means business. And the business in question was her punching her jobber opponent in the face once, and then performing a spinning kick, and she won the match with 2 strikes. 2 strikes. Out. But after this, she then went to leave the ring, and the leader kind of sat on the chair with a pale face and like a mask like that. She kind of like moved her arm and like did this, and then that led to Xia Li just whooping that poor jobber's ass even more. Xia Li's scary, but I like it. We then had Casey Catanzaro and Kaden Carter pretty much saying that everybody expects them to get beaten in this first round of the Dusty Rhodes Classic, the women's version of it. But you know what? They want people to underestimate them going forward so they can shock them and shock the world. But with their first match being against Mercedes Martinez and Toni Storm, don't like the chances. We then had a little backstage scuffle between Jake Atlas and Isaiah Swerve Scott, who obviously had just lost their match earlier in the night. And this was broken up by Bronson Reed, who was just like, cool it. And if he says that to you, you listen, and that's exactly what happened. And finally, we got to the main event, which was obviously the Undisputed Era's Adam Cole and Roderick Strong taking on former NXT Tag Team Champions Breezango in a fairly entertaining main event. So obviously it had been announced earlier in the night that Kyle O'Reilly would be there at ringside just to cover, just in case the likes of Pete Dunne and Oney Lorcan, Danny Burch and all those guys, if they came down to the ring, he'd be there. One guy with a busted up jaw would be there to defend Undisputed Era. So again, not looking good there. But the match itself was pretty much what you'd expect out of these two teams. That early on they were just trying to figure each other out. There was a point where Tyler Breeze and Adam Cole both went for super kicks at the same time. They were like, oh, you've got a super kick, I've got a super kick. Let's just keep them cocked. And also, it has to be said, I think Roderick Strong is one of the most underrated hot tags in the business right now, because he starts running the ropes, doing his little forearms. He then picked up Tyler Breeze and just dropped him belly first on top of Fandango. After this, we had Tyler Breeze hitting like an inverted backbreaker on Adam Cole. There was loads of other like kicks in the face, and loads of chaos just ensued, and all the teams ended up flat on their backs, and I was thinking, what is going to happen next? And of course, we knew what was coming. The inevitable interference from Pete Dunne, Danny Burch, Oney Lorcan. They all came down to the ring and just jumped Kyle O'Reilly. They had his face up against that like framed scaffolding thing, and I was like, oh great, he's gonna get kneed in the face now. But he didn't. Well, he didn't yet, because Finn Balor came down, made the save. I was like, oh, the prince saves the day. Then the prince got outnumbered, and Kyle O'Reilly got kneed in the jaw into the barricade. It looked really painful. And Adam Cole kind of had a similar look on his face. He was like, oh my God, look at his face. Oh, this is just awful. And it looked like he was going to be distracted and like Undisputed Era were going to lose this match, but that is not what happened. Because Adam Cole fought his way through the distractions on the outside and the chaos that was going around, and eventually he went for like the Panama Sunrise off the top rope. He got reversed out of that, and then Fandango went for the leg drop off the top rope. Adam Cole got up, super kicked him in the face on the way down, and the Undisputed Era's Adam Cole and Roderick Strong are through to the next round of the Dusty Classic. But at what cost? Because after this match, you look at Kyle O'Reilly, you look at him on the floor, his face is just like all swollen and broken, and he wasn't speaking like that because that would have been weird. But it looks like that's going to have some lasting damage. He could be out now for some time. Finn Balor also like wormed into frame, so it does look like Balor is like semi-aligned with the Undisputed Era at this point. But Pete Dunne looks like an absolute badass. This match, this entire main event, and this segment after it, it's got me intrigued. It's something of a cliffhanger, I think, going into next week's show, and all of it's gonna get an up. So those have been your ups and downs for this week's NXT. Obviously, we had a lot of first round matches from the Dusty Classic, a few other singles matches weaved in between. We've got more tag team chaos coming next week. I'm very excited for me. Let me know what you think about all my ups and downs here, if you agree with them, or you inevitably don't. Either way, we like hearing about it. I've been Gareth from WhatCulture Wrestling. You can follow myself on Twitter at gmorgan04. Follow everybody here at WhatCulture at WhatCultureWB. I hope you enjoyed this lovely blue screen setup thing that we got going on here. I know it's a nice change and I wish I would have done it sooner, but you know what? I'm lazy. In the meantime, have the best week possible. I will see you around this time next week. Next Thursday, we'll be here talking about all things NXT. And you know what? I might even wear something yellow. That's a reason to tune in. See you later.